Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
You gotta be confident about your Achilles when you
Chase
show up.
Thornton,
Yeah, I mean, I got him at
Chris
Hearing
Dowhouse,
about these are pointless in fantasy.
and Adam LaRue. Don't hope to win. Be great and dominate.
Well, all right. Welcome into Operation Domination. It's time for week 9. We're getting into the playoff push, fellas. Just a couple of weeks away, but there's still time for you to make it, even if you're below 500 right now. Do not give up. That's what we are here for. When I say we, I'm your host, Dan Mader, joined with Adam LaRue, Chase Thornton, and Chris D. Adam LaRue showing my name because he wants to be double the credit for me. Thank you for that, Adam. I appreciate it so very much. All right, guys, we got a lot to get into as always, but some big. All right, Diontae Johnson traded to the Baltimore Ravens. Now, before we get into the fantasy aspect of this all, I did think it was a little interesting that Carolina made it pretty clear that this was not just about his play on the field or having to rebuild. They kind of slid it in there that they didn't really like what was going on in the locker room with him, similar to what was going on with Pittsburgh. Maybe with Baltimore, that changes because you have Lamar there, and of course, the winning culture and a culture that might actually be a Super Bowl contender. We'll have to see. But I just thought it was interesting. Now we got 2 stops in a row. Starting to feel a little bit like AB, do I dare to say? I hope not for Diontae Johnson's sake. Oh, man. But right off the rip here, so Diontae Johnson going to the Ravens. Chris, what is your take on the fantasy fallout of this move?
Well, I mean, fantasy-wise, I think it's disappointing for a lot of people. I think that people who have Flowers are disappointed. People who are getting excited, Andrew's starting to get more involved, might be a little bit disappointed. Bateman was showing some flashes for some fantasy, Dynasty owners out there. Adam will get to him later on. But I think overall, Diontae Johnson is going to help this offense. It's going to be really interesting to see what kind of role he plays. He's a lot like Flowers in a lot of ways, but the separation that you're going to have for Lamar is going to really make this offense be even more explosive. So I think it could be a boom. And I think, Dan, what receiver is happy with shitty quarterbacks? I mean, I don't think there's a receiver out there that doesn't complain when they play the crap quarterback play.
Lamar Jackson is definitely the best quarterback that he has played with in a very, very long time. That much is fair. Chris, while I got you there, anyway, we got a defensive question coming in from Messi. Should he start the Kansas City defense or start the Eagles defense this week?
Look, I know the Eagles defense was a sweet matchup versus Jacksonville, and they looked good there last week, couple weeks, but I don't trust this defense still. The pressure rate's not there. You're not really seeing these corners, on the outside be the shutdown you're hoping to see. While the Chiefs defense has been great. I know Tampa Bay has an offensive firepower in some ways, but Baker Mayfield turns that ball over. A lot of times in defense, you want to get interception opportunities and turnover opportunities. I'm going to play that Chief defense.
Yeah, 100% agreement there. So this is not a big fantasy thing. This next one, Cam Robinson gets traded to the Minnesota Vikings, but it does have big fantasy impact. We on this show in particular, especially when we go over team profiles, we harp all the time the importance of the offensive line when it comes to the fantasy impact of the rest of the players around them. And I, for one, am very happy to see that the Vikings didn't tuck their tail between their legs, didn't try to make it work with a backup, decided to go out there, get aggressive, and bring in Cam Robinson to try to replace Shaw, who's going to be out for the rest of the year. So, Adam, when you're looking at this situation and Cam Robinson comes in, does this mean in your mind it doesn't affect Aaron Jones now? It doesn't affect Justin Jefferson now moving forward because at least they have an adequate replacement there? Because it did look a little shaky in that Thursday night game in the second half against the Rams. A big reason I think they won is because the offense got stale because they couldn't really move the ball. They couldn't protect Sam Darnold anymore.
I mean, look, Darrisaw's a lot better than Cam Robinson, but Cam Robinson does a lot better than their backup, right? So I don't want to go as far as to say that there's no impact, right? But it definitely reduces kind of that drop off that you're going to see. Maybe if you were hoping to sell high on Darnold, you might have kind of missed your opportunity to an extent. But I wouldn't be that concerned if I owned Aaron Jones or Justin Jefferson. And even Darnold, I think, will still be an adequate super flex play throughout the season. I just think his, the QB1 that you were seeing towards the beginning of the season, that might be donezo.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that one. Messi coming back should keep the Kansas City defense for week 10. I tend to think so. There's one of the elite defenses in the league right now. Okay, so Anthony Richardson benched. Now I wanted to give Chase this because I know Adam is crying in a corner somewhere. His Richardson picks failed, so I didn't want to pick on him too much. We'll get to that later in the show. But Chase, Anthony Richardson gets benched for Joe Flacco, the old man. So I go to the old man on the show to ask, what fantasy impact is this going to have?
Oh, it's going to be so glorious for everybody that has been lamenting the idea that Anthony Richardson doesn't seem to be able to play quarterback in the NFL. At least he hasn't shown that propensity so far in his career. Yeah, I think this is going to be a good move for all the pass catchers on that team. I like the pass catchers on that team. Pittman, Downs, I think it's going to be awesome for Downs. Even, Alec Pearson and Adonai Mitchell. We haven't seen a ton out of Mitchell yet, but Flacco is so far superior to Richardson in terms of his down in, down out capability throwing the football. I think it can't help but help this team because you weren't even necessarily getting the running production that you were hoping to get out of Anthony Richardson this year anyway. So if he's not running like you want him to run, and if he can't throw the football, what does that leave you with? A really fun, awesome, one long deep pass that he threw that everybody, oohed and awed over. But we saw it last year with Flacco in Cleveland, where he came in and kind of rejuvenated that offense and played to a high fantasy standard. I think he can do the same thing this year in terms of, being fantasy relevant himself and elevating the guys around him. It's been long enough. I had already bailed on Richardson in my one redraft share of him this year. My one dynasty share of him is, a little sad about it, but this move needed to happen. They have a good enough team to win some ball games in the AFC. They have a good enough ball club to, challenge for that division, I think. And this quarterback gives them the best chance to win and gives the fantasy assets on that team the best chance to actually reach their potential.
Yep, total agreement there. We're going to get to Josh Downs a little bit later in the show. We do have another question coming in. McMillan, Odunze, or Dottle flex one of these players this week? Chris, you got one here?
I like Odunze. Look, I know he hasn't been the guy that you're looking for in this the receivers in general have been kind of hit or miss for the Bears, but I love the matchup versus Arizona. I think this is a hit spot for this team, and I think Odunze has the upside of all those three guys. Dowdle is just a dude. McMillan, I think you have your with the K and up in the running backs and playing that Chiefs defense we talked about earlier. Not the greatest matchup for him, so I'm going to go with the guy that has most upside of those three.
Yeah, I mean, McMillan, I think, has the best target share here, but he's playing against Kansas City that Monday night game. I don't love that. Dowdle, I never want to play a Dallas Cowboy running back if I can absolutely help it. So I'm with you there. I'm taking the shot on O'Duns. And one more question before we get over to Chase's segment. If someone asked for Jefferson and Jameis to get Lamar in a super flex, would you do it? Daniel's my other quarterback, and my other receivers are neighbors, Deontay, Waddle, and Dell. Adam, what do you think?
For Jefferson and Jameis to get Lamar in a super flex. No, I would not do that. Yeah, I wouldn't.
I get Daniels and Lamar.
Yeah.
Yeah, you agree with that, Adam? I was leaving it for you to finish it off the sentence, but I don't know if we're on a delay or what.
Sorry, I need to rejoin.
Oh, Adam's having a little technical difficulty. So while we're trying to get that situation, why don't we go ahead and get the DFS cocktail hour.
All right. Hey, here we go. So let's take a look at this gentleman this week. We are making a cocktail tonight called an Old Scholar, and you're going to see why when we get into the ingredients here in just a minute here. But looking at the lines and the totals for the week, one of the games that really stands out to me is the Rams playing at Seattle. Now, that game has a point total of 48.5. The Rams, are about a 1.5 favorite right now. It's the third highest point total on the slate for Sunday there. And I think there are some pass game points to be had there. So we're going to be going with an LA Rams pairing for this game as we get out our shaker here that we're going to make this drink in. We're going to take Matthew Stafford at quarterback at 5,700. He's the cheapest of the quarterbacks from these high point total games, but he's coming off a week. If you saw it last week where he finally had all of his weapons Remember, I don't count Tyler Higbee as a weapon, so his absence doesn't really matter for my purposes here. But Seattle's a bit better pass defense than Minnesota has, but with a healthy Cupper Coop, as my 6-year-old calls him, and that surprise appearance or surprise, reappearance from Puka Nacua, that offense looks ready to roll to me. We're going to pair Stafford there with Nacua. He's the cheaper of the 2-star Ram wideouts by about $500 this week at $7,200. He led the team in targets last week. He scored over 21 DraftKings fantasy points despite not getting in the end zone there. The Seahawks have surrendered the 8th most touchdowns through the air to their opponents. I like Puka. I like Kupp. Both, but we'll take that slight discount on Puka. We're going to get a top 10 option still. So we're going to go with, from that Rams-Seattle game, Stafford and Puka. Normally, we'd automatically come back with a player from across the field there, but I'm not overly crazy about the value that the Seahawks are representing here in this game. So, if of any of the Seahawks, I'd actually say I like Geno Smith, but we've already got our quarterback. So we're going to move on to an ingredient that gives this cocktail its name, and we're going to use some sage leaves, and hence the old scholar name for this. Sage leaves. And those sage leaves are going to be our spicy DST this week, and that's the New England Patriots against the Tennessee Titans. In 7 games for the Titans this year, their opponent has been the number 1 DraftKings defensive special teams 3 times. I'm going to take those odds for a relatively affordable $3,000 here on the week, and we're going to move on, okay? So next up, we're going to add an ounce of simple syrup to our shaker here, and that is our sweet running back play, DeAndre Swift at 6,400. Swift, a guy that I'm not necessarily big on long term. I wasn't big on him coming into the year, but he's been pretty awesome this season. He's better than I ever would have expected. He's got a touchdown in 4 straight games. He's averaging 23.3 DraftKings points over that time frame. Cardinals give up the 5th most points to the running back position. Arizona's only a 1-point favorite at home there. It's a sweet matchup for a sweet ingredient. So that's going to be our running back play there, DeAndre Swift at 6,400. Now we are going to muddle that together here real quick. And remember, when we're muddling, we're not trying to mulch things. We're just trying to express the oils and the scent there. So just a couple of pushes there. And now we're going to add some ice here. And that ice, that cool play is going to be our tight end this week, Jawan Johnson. A little bit of a surprise maybe here, but Jawan Johnson. But Derek Carr looks like he might come back this week. Carolina gives up the most points to opposing tight ends. Now you're going to want to watch Jawan Johnson's shoulder situation. He's been kind of in and out of practice here the last 2 weeks with that, but his head looks okay from the concussion scare that he had last week. And if he just hits his average points from the last month or so, he's going to return really good value there at only $3,200. So now we're going to add 4 ounces of orange juice. And we are going to take a running back who also wears orange in Chase Brown at 5,900. Now, over his last 5 games, he's averaging 14.5 DraftKings points to just 8.5 for Zach Moss, the guy who started the year as the supposed alpha in this backfield. It's been gradually going Chase Brown's way. I think he has fully taken over that lead rush role. Zach Moss still is getting about a target or 2 a game more than Brown, but Brown's been scoring better than Moss here for the last month plus. Vegas allows the 10th most points to opposing running backs. Cincinnati's a touchdown plus favorite at 7.5 points there. Let's go. Chase Brown at 5,900 is going to be one of our running backs, our other running back for the week. And now we are going to get to the good stuff. It's going to be 3 ounces of rye whiskey. We'll go back to our old friend High West here, so high test. But that's going to be Drake London at 6,700 as we count out 1, 2, 3 ounces there of High West. Now, if you've been watching the foosball this season, Drake London's been pretty outstanding outside of last week. Okay. He's 5th in targets on the season. He's already had a career high in touchdown catches for the year. He should bounce back this week in a game against Dallas that has the highest point total on the slate at 52. So Drake London is going to be our, like I said, our high test, High West rye whiskey there in that shaker. So now while I shake that up, we've got to talk about our wide receiver 3 position. And our wide receiver 3 position, we have got some options that kind of range from a little bit higher in the price range to a little bit lower. And I need you guys to talk amongst yourselves here and figure this out. We've got 4 options that I kind of like here for this week, and I'll give them to you as such. Zay Flowers at 7,000 is the most expensive option of the 4 here. So you've got Zay Flowers there against Denver. keep in mind, like we said, they just traded for Deontay Johnson, but I still expect Flowers for at least this week, at least to be the alpha there. Devontae Smith, we could go back to that. Well, after a good game last week, he's at 6,800. DK Metcalf, if healthy and plays, is at 6,500. And he would be the playback to Stafford and Nakua that we're already using from that game. Or Khalil Shakir at 5,900. So while I shake this up on mute here, why don't you guys give that a go? Or does anybody have any other suggestions they would like for that wide receiver 3 position? Dan, you want to start?
No, I'm okay. I'm okay with those suggestions there. I mean, it's Devonta Smith against Jacksonville. I think that's pretty clear here. I'm going to take that shot. Zay Flowers, I don't expect Deontay Johnson to come in right away and have the huge target ceiling that's going to cap on Zay Flowers or anything like that right off the rip. But I do love Devonta Smith against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Metcalf's dealing with the injury. Shakir, Amari Cooper's playing more snaps. He's supposed to be okay. He practiced in limited fashion today, so I think he's going to play. So that's where I would go. And where do you guys go, Chris and Adam?
I mean, for me, of the options that you gave me, Chase, if DK Metcalf's healthy, I'm playing DK Metcalf, no doubt to me. He's the receiver, one of those guys. I like, Devontae Smith's matchup, but I think A.J. Brown's the alpha in that receiving passing game. Versus Jacksonville, it'll be debatable how much you really need to use Devonta. So I think it's going to be interesting to see, will he be able to get that target share you're looking for? The other guys, I think, Trey Flowers, whether or not we see, Deontay Johnson steal his shares or not, to me, it doesn't really matter. We see other guys super involved in that offense in general, just kind of lots of mouths feeding. So for me, I'm not going to spend that money on Flowers. I'll go DK with most upside for me at that value.
I think I agree in terms of my general preferences.
Yeah, go ahead, Adam. Go ahead.
I'm just a little more concerned with DK's injury. I think if he sheds the tag, then I'm with you, and DK is my choice. But if not, and that is kind of where I'm leaning is the most likely to happen, right, is that he carries questionable. Just for a little bit of safety, I think I want to lean Devonta. But again, if he sheds the tag, I'm with you. It's DK for me.
Okay, so we're kind of evenly split here. I like Devontae Smith. It was a good call last week by us, but DK, yeah, I like him. He would be, like I said, he would be our playback if he's healthy. That's a situation we need to monitor this week. We need to make sure that we are watching that in case he doesn't play. You would still have time to swap him out there. But I do like DK Metcalf there, and he is the third most expensive option of those three at only 6,500 there. I like that idea as well. Save us a little bit more money here for that flex position. We have $5,400 left then now for our flex, and that's going to be our garnish. And our garnish here is going to be not just a little wedge of orange there, but also another sprig of that sage. Give it a nice smell there as well, a nice aroma. So at 5,400, here's where we're talking for flex now. And let's see what we can find here that we like. Ezekiel Elliott, we already talked about. We don't want to use a Dallas running back in that game, especially Ezekiel Elliott, as he looks about 3 times as old as he is right now. But another option at 5,400 could be Cortland Sutton against Baltimore there. Baltimore does give up passing yardage. That's the one thing you can do against them is throw the ball all over the place. They've looked pretty good that way lately. So Cortland Sutton at 5,400 is in play here. Keon Coleman, Miami at Buffalo, is in play here at 5,400 as well. Running backs, Austin Eckler, Kamani Vidal are both in play at 5,300 apiece. Or you've actually got a couple of tight ends that might have some flex appeal this week. Evan Ingram is 5,300, Jacksonville against Philadelphia. Remember, they just lost Christian Kirk. They may be without Brian Thomas. Evan Ingram might be their top pass catching option this week. Or you'd also have, possibly Jake Ferguson in that shootout with Atlanta. He's only 5,100. That saves us $200. We could maybe go back if you would like to upgrade a place elsewhere. But what are we thinking here for a flex position, fellas?
Hey, Chase.
Adam, why don't we start with you since we went last with you last? Oh, go ahead. Nope, go ahead, Chris. You got a question. Let's go for it.
If you have do you know how much Jacoby Myers is going to cost? I think he's around that range. That was a big Jacoby Myers is dead in that range. Yeah, Jacoby Myers is, well, I just lost him. I had him and then I lost him.
Jacoby Myers is 5,300. And yeah, if he's healthy, and I haven't heard anything that says that he shouldn't play, I don't think, but if he is healthy and playing, he's only at 5,300. He was limited at practice today, but there's a good chance that, that he's just out on maintenance today or limited on maintenance today. So he should be able to play. So he would be in play as well, Jacoby Myers.
Yeah, that's a great call out, Chris. Actually, I was leaning Cortland Sutton in that initial group. He's just such a target hog this season so far. And again, I've talked about this a few weeks ago that I think he's due for positive regression just based on those targets, and that is a good matchup. However, the splits Jacoby Myers got in that first game without Devontae Adams is awesome. They are moving him around the offense. He's like dead even between being out wide and slot, and I think that's perfect for him, being a really solid route runner, being a solid separator. So yeah, great call out, and Jacoby Myers would definitely be my choice.
Yeah, I'll back that.
So we've got a Jacoby Myers vote.
Well,
go ahead. No, go ahead, Dan. You gonna just back that up, Chris? Is that where you're going to then? Yeah. Well, it looks like we got 3 votes for Jacoby Myers. Yeah, nope. I am all for that. I'll go with that too. That leaves us only with $100 left to spend here, which means that we pretty much exhausted our budget. But that leaves us with, like we said, Stafford at quarterback, Chase Brown, DeAndre Swift at running back. Our wide receiver core, our 3 starters would be Puka Nacua, Drake London, DK Metcalf. That's a pretty solid core there. Juwan Johnson at tight end. Jacoby Myers at the flex, and then the Patriots DST. And this would be your old scholar. Enjoy and best of luck this week on your DST, on your daily fantasy plays, I should say. DST. I got DST on the brain now that I talked about the Patriots.
Yeah, of course. All right, let's get to a few questions here before we move on. Derek asking, should trade Josh Allen and David Montgomery for Saquon Barkley with Dak as his backup? Could add Stroud or Tua from the waivers. What do you guys think about that trade off the rip? Josh Allen and David Montgomery for Saquon Barkley, who's been probably the number 2 running back or number 1 running back, depending on what Derrick Henry is doing that week. Go ahead, Adam.
Yes, assuming this is a 1 quarterback redraft straight up, which it seems to be. I think I would absolutely be willing to go for that. Saquon, kind of to your point, has been dominant the whole season, and the Eagles' offense only looks to be improving. The last 2 weeks have definitely been the best that I've seen out of them. Since their win streak at the start of last season. So yeah, I think the way that the Eagles' offense is moving, you certainly wish that Saquon would get in the end zone a little bit more, that Jalen wasn't stealing that. But the efficiency is off the charts, and yeah, I think he's the best player, at least in a 1 quarterback league. I think he's the best player in the trade.
And it would get you out of that Gibbs Montgomery double up that you've got there too.
I don't think that's really a problem with those two. I don't really have an issue having a double up when it comes to David Montgomery or Gibbs. Chris Gatlin, if you were Gatlin, do you think you would be able to get DJ Moore for Cedric Tillman and Deontay Johnson?
I think it's tangible. Tillman's had 2 great back-to-back games. Maybe somebody's excited about Deontay Johnson going to Baltimore. You haven't seen a lot of production out of DJ Moore lately, so maybe that's something you can try to pull off, at least make the offer.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think there is a chance because you have Tillman to do it. I just don't know if I would, frankly, because it's been a target spread around in Chicago with DJ Moore not always getting his to begin with. And they still got to spread out the key now. We still haven't seen Roma Dunsey be consistently involved. In fact, the only person who's been consistently involved is DeAndre Swift. So I don't know if I would even do that deal, frankly. But with that, let's go to domination defense of the week.
All right, Dan. So dominating defenses weren't so dominating last week because defenses in general have been struggled. There's only 3 defenses went over double digits. Hopefully that could change, but not great matchups again this week. Some of the better defenses are also on buys or have bad matchups. But I'm going to go with kind of a gut feel with them, and I'm going to give you some stats to back it. But the play I'm going to go with is Chicago Bears versus the Arizona Cardinals. Chicago's defense is one of the better pass pressures, and pressure rate metrics. A team that's been able to be one of the top red zone defenses, held the Washington Commanders last week to all field goals until a Hail Mary at the very end, which was frustrating as hell. But in general, the Bears defense played And I think that's one of the defenses that we've seen Arizona has been getting credit for when it's supposed to offense and all over the place. Some weeks it shows up, some weeks it doesn't. I don't like the offensive line matchup. I don't think that they're going to be able to keep Chicago out of the backfield in general. I think Chicago, like I said earlier, I think offensively they're going to explode as well. I like the Bears defense this week. And I'll give you a bonus, which I was going to pick, but I wasn't sure of the status. Tyron Tracy Jr., if he's going to be out for New York Giants, I like the Washington Commanders defense versus that Giants defense, offense, I should say. We see that Giants offense loves to turn the ball over. They also go a plethora of sacks. Washington's defense is better of late, and they can put up lots of points from that Giant offense as well, which can make that game get out of hand. So I like the Washington defense as well. Like the Tyron Tracy Jr. is out this week.
You find me offensive, I find you offensive for finding me offensive.
All right. So going from defense to offense, Dan, we talked about a little bit at the beginning of the show, the quarterback quandaries that are existing. Anthony Richardson out, Bryce Young back in. We see Jameis Winston get brushed off, basically was sitting behind DTR. DTR gets hurt. Jameis comes off, starts last week, throws 300 yards, more than we've seen Cleveland offense do in the last 2 years, except for when Joe Flacco was playing, who another guy that we talked about earlier in the show, which makes me think about the quarterback plays just in general. This season and last year we saw this as well. Quarterbacks have been all over the place, from guys that we thought were going to be good, like Anthony Richardson, although I didn't think he was going to be good, has been benched. Dan Daniels, some of the guys that we really liked. Dan and I were a guy that we kept harping on. Jaden Daniels was the legs that you wanted to get in this draft in a sense. Josh Allen's been pretty solid, but CJ Stroud has not. It depends on, we keep hearing about weapons. Well, Aaron Rodgers is weapons galore, and he can't really produce. So, Dan, I watched last week. Justin Fields, disappointed watching him to get benched 2 weeks ago. We watched Russell Wilson and listening to everybody talk about how he cooked again. So we're back on Russell Wilson, train again. So I go through all those different things to talk about quarterback quandaries in general. And Dan, it has me kind of frustrated or trying to figure out, football-wise, what I see and what I feel versus what fantasy is can be much different. And I want to know who's good and who's not. So I'm going to start off with one of the guys that I know that you struggle with and have not been a big fan of our show over time, but this guy has the most touchdown passes since 2023 season started last year. This guy is the QB2 right now in this season and lost both his top weapons and had 330 yards and 3 touchdowns last week. I'm talking about the one, the only Baker Mayfield. Dan, is Baker Mayfield now a top-tier quarterback option?
So it's a little tricky. I figure you're going to answer me. You're going to ask me this question. It's a little tricky because I don't think you can use Baker in your starting lineup for the next 3 weeks. You have Kansas City this week, San Francisco in week 10, and then on the bye week in week 11. He doesn't have Mike Evans, no Chris Godwin, no Mike Evans, probably until they come back after the bye in week 12. Here's the thing, and this is where I'm going to have to swallow it and say, you know what? Baker is probably going to finish at least as a top 8 quarterback by the end of the year and is going to have a great second half of the season. Outside of the Chargers, he has the best schedule a quarterback could possibly have for the rest of that second half when they come back from that bye. They play the Chargers week 15, which is the first round of the playoffs, which could get a little bit tricky if you don't have another backup option. But outside of that, and I'm trying to get it pulled back up here. I just had it 2 seconds ago. Besides that, he has the Giants in week 12, the Panthers, the Raiders, Dallas, and then the championship week, he has Carolina. So it's hard for me to imagine, especially if you have Mike Evans back after the week 11 bye, that Baker Mayfield doesn't at least finish as a top 8 quarterback and maybe top 5 the rest of the way after these next 3 weeks. So you could have somebody come and rotate there. But yes, for that second half push, he will be.
Yeah, Baker Mayfield could now be a top-tier quarterback. Another thing that's been kind of interesting in guys that are coming out of nowhere or positions in general that we might not expect for things to happen. Chase, we talked a lot about, after ATR or after Alfred Smith. Well, Pittsburgh, the quarterback position, whether it was Justin Fields or Russell Wilson, is QB7 in the season, averaging 19.3 points if it's Russ, 19.1 if it's Justin Fields. Doesn't really matter if it's the legs or the arms. But I bring the question, the question I actually have for you, though, is when it comes to some of these guys that we're seeing kind of come out of nowhere, we depend on people's legs, we depend on people's arms. Sometimes it could be a hybrid of both. So, for example, in 2022, Daniel Jones was a top 6 quarterback. He had 15 touchdowns passing, 5 interceptions, but he was able to rush for 7 touchdowns. Nothing major, but like I said, top 6 quarterback. So I bring up Danny Dimes because we have Bo Nichols doing very similar things out in Denver. Bo Nichols has been the last 4 weeks, 23 points, 21 points, 14 points, 30 points. That's top. And I'm sorry, for the season, it's been top 9 quarterback for the last 5 weeks, has one of the top 5 quarterbacks that you could have. So Bo Nichols has 4 touchdown rushes already, has 8 passing touchdowns, well on his way through that, has 35 pass attempts averaging per game. Can Bo Nix now be a QB1?
He's QB9 overall on the season, but he's only QB14 on a points per game basis. He does have a top 12 consistency rating, though. I mean, he's been remarkably consistent, especially like you said here over the last month and a half or so. He has shown that he's got a rushing floor. He's coming off a 3 touchdown, 0 interception game, but he still doesn't have any 300-yard passing days. That's not what they're asking him to do necessarily. It looks like he's somebody Sean Payton can work with and can run the offense that Sean Payton wants him to run. I don't think he's a QB1 dead on in my book quite yet. He is doing kind of a.
He does have more rush. He does have more rush yards than Josh Allen. He's got more of a game high yards than Josh Allen. Had 75 was his high, 54. So it's not like he can't run. And like I said, the weeks that's what
I mean. He's shown he has that rushing floor
and rushing.
He's shown that he has that rushing floor.
He's got more than Kyle Lamar and Josh Allen do. So is it something like numbers wise? I hear what you're saying, but he's doing that in Daniel Jones's numbers. Can he be able to kind of replicate that and go throughout the season?
Like I said, it looks like he can. I'm not ready to anoint him as a QB1 for the rest of the season. I think he's a good bye week fill-in. I think he's a great QB2 with high upside. He is doing kind of a weird, like Patrick Mahomes impression almost, where he's like showing that he can run a little bit, and he's been, pretty consistent. But he does have a week 14 bye, so everybody keep that in mind. If you are picking him up, he's part of the Bye-Mageddon, group. So if you've got Lamar, you can't necessarily pick him up to back up Lamar or even Flacco or that kind of thing. I'm not ready to anoint him as a QB1, but I'm thrilled if I have him in Dynasty, if I picked him up, because I think that he is going to be better. He looks like he can be better than I gave him credit for coming into the season. And it looks like I said, I think the Sean Payton marriage there is making it work. And I really like that idea. I'm just not ready to quite anoint him as a week in, week out QB1 just yet. It's only been half a season. And like I said, I want to pump the brakes on him just a bit.
All right. So Adam, with quarterbacks like Baker and Bo Nichols and Sam Darnold and some of the spot guys you've seen like Joe Flacco and Justin Fields when he was starting, does it give you some different options when it comes to what to do with the quarterback position moving forward? And maybe trading some of these big names, or maybe using some of these guys that maybe you had Anthony Richardson, you got a new guy, looking to unload some different players. What are you strategizing with these kind of, flux and quarterback right now? And how are you using it to your advantage?
Yeah, I'm trying to dive in and see, how fluky does it seem versus how much is it, how the offense is built, right? Whether or not I'm looking for one of these guys to target. So, for example, Baker Mayfield is someone that I am genuinely targeting and have been for about a month now, rather aggressively. I think I've added him in like 4 or 5 dynasties. It went out and made moves specifically to get Baker because I saw over the first month of the season before I did that how much they were throwing in the red zone and how they were functionally, and this makes sense, right, with Liam Cohen coming over from the Rams and, that whole tree, right? They were using the passing game functionally as a running game, and he was kind of getting credit for it, right? It's not like Baker's necessarily having some career revelation. I mean, he's playing better football than he did, at the end in Cleveland or in Carolina or, even with the Rams, right? But it's not like oh, my God, Baker's elite now. They're doing a lot of smart things. He's getting credit for a lot of
Most
things.
touchdown passes since last year, though, man. In 2 years,
Sure,
a year and a
but
half now.
of
That's
the
pretty elite.
No, agreed. I'm not. But realistically, if you look through where those are coming from, it's not like he's throwing dimes down the field. This isn't a Josh Allen thing. This is every time they get in the red zone, he's the one walking away with that touchdown. Whether that's a back fade to Evans, which they really like to do, whether that's getting finding a way to get Godwin open, or did obviously, or just hey, let's get something short of the sticks and let a guy run in, and he runs in to a degree himself, which is really good. And obviously we know that that's really good for the math, both in fantasy and also in the red zone. Making you account for all 11 players is incredibly valuable. We've seen that time and time again. So I say all that with Baker. It's as a function of the offense, even if his play isn't necessarily, I don't think it's fantastic, right? But as long as that offense is in play, he's going to be awesome, because that's their identity, is him throwing in the red zone. So he's been a specific target in that sense. And kind of to your point earlier, Bo Nix's mobility is becoming not just a side effect, is becoming a function of the offense, something that they're actually looking to use as time is going on. Not necessarily in designed runs, but it seems pretty clear, right, that he has a read or two, and then he's looking to potentially make a play on the ground. So I think as you see these things that are actually replicable, right, for these offenses, whether you believe in the quarterback or not, you just have to shrug and go, all right, well, they can do the thing that is getting them points, and they can repeat that. If Bo Nix was suddenly throwing bombs down the field, and that's for 2 weeks, and that's where the points were coming from, then I would be a little hesitant, right? Because I don't know that he can repeat that time and time again. I don't think he can. But since he's getting those points on the ground and throwing it to guys underneath who are able to create yak, I do think those are things he can do. Those are things that coming in, that was always he's limited, but these are the things that he can do. And they're highlighting those strengths. That's what I'm looking for in those cases. And to answer your question, absolutely. If I drafted a Patrick Mahomes, for instance, there's someone in my league still married to that name value. Getting one of those guys is absolutely an upgrade in my opinion, because I think the Mahomes situation is going to improve, but it's going to improve to like maybe where it was last season, which is still not great.
All right. So last question for you guys, and this is kind of the thing that all three of you are going to have a chance to answer. Each are going to get a team, and you're going to have a chance to kind of break down the receivers. What we want to kind of look at is receiver or target consolidation, as I'm going to call it. We have lots of receivers on these three different teams that people are dropping, adding, trading. What do we do with them? Because the quarterback situations are changing. Different guys are hot. Different guys are, we like this guy, we don't like this guy. So we're going to start off, Adam, with you. The Colts. Now that Joe Flacco is the quarterback, what is the value as receivers of the Colts? How far can I dip into it, and kind of give me an idea of where I want to rank these guys?
Yeah, so I definitely think they all improve, right? I think it's interesting. To me, I just want to get the guy with the least overlap, so I'm going to rank down to the highest, right? Because these other guys can all kind of compete for each other. For example, if you look at the route charts for a Pittman and a Pierce, when they're at their most consistent, sure, we've all seen the splash plays with Pierce, right? The down the field, the seams, the whatever. But when they're at their most consistent, both of them want to be running intermediate crossers. Like, that's where they're going to actually, if you were to build a case for them to be a week-over-week startable receiver, that's what they're doing. And realistically, they're not going to both be doing that every week. I think A.D. Mitchell is kind of similar, especially similar to Pierce, but is a guy who you would want to be running crossers.
So, Adam, real quick, is Pierce and Mitchell, are these guys worth rostering right now, in your opinion, that Flacco's a quarterback?
I think I would lean towards Pierce. I think Mitchell's still suffering some growing pains. You saw that last week with the touchdown that, really should have been a touchdown. He needed to be able to get his feet in there. I think he's kind of struggling with adapting to the NFL at the current moment. Pitt is a guy who, I would put into question his effort as of late. So I do think there's a chance that Pierce could start to eke into his routes. So I think Pierce is one that I'm willing to roster. Mitchell as a dart throw, especially in bigger roster leagues, but not necessarily someone that I'm expecting to be an immediate contributor in a smaller redraft, not necessarily. But Downs is the guy that definitely I feel the most confident about, and I would be starting him pretty highly this week.
All right. Dan, going to you, talking about the Cleveland Browns now. Joe Flacco, James Winston's the quarterback. I got confused for a second because we've actually got a quarterback with an arm again in Cleveland. Joe Flacco is not there. James Winston is. Now the receivers without Amari Cooper, what are you looking at the receiver core, and how deep can we go and dip into this receiving pass catchers for Cleveland?
I'm not going anything past Cedric Tillman and David Njoku. Like, we've seen flashes from Elijah Moore in the past where he pops up, looks good, and then disappears. We have a long track record of that. Judy's just a dude. He's running the most snaps. He's running the most routes. It rarely equals into anything. Okay. They had a decent game this past week. They were against one of the worst passing defenses in the league. Shockingly, I know it's the Baltimore Ravens, but that facts are facts. That back end has not been very good. They go against the Chargers this week. This week's going to tell us. You have a much tougher matchup. Who does he go to? Who does he trust when the coverage gets tight? Tillman's been making the big plays downfield. We know Winston wants to let it fly. And Tillman's been somebody who's been up and coming for a while and has been seizing the opportunity and pops off the screen more so than Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore. We know what David Njoku can do. We saw him be a league winner last year when he actually gets 7+ targets per game. And he's already shown, even when Jameis Winston took over late in the game in week 7, he was the go-to option in the red zone. So those are the two guys I'm looking at. I am not really excited about anybody else on this team. Remember, Winston has a high variance rate in and of himself from week to week.
Yeah, good points. Elijah Moore is interesting, though. 20 targets combined the last 2 games, so it is kind of interesting to be on your radar. But I agree, Dan, right now, you can't trust that. Tillman, how high are you going? Receiver 2, receiver 3, or you got your starting week in, week out? How high are you on Tillman, Dan, real quick?
So Tillman is a wide receiver 3 for me. He's a high-end wide receiver 3. I do think he has the potential to be a wide receiver 2 moving forward if he continues with the downfield passing attempts and continues with being either, second or first in target share on this team, which I think is consistently going to happen. He's taken that Amari Cooper role. That role is usually featured in the Ken Dorsey passing attack offense, who also took over play calling. So I think Tillman has wide receiver 2 upside. Right now, I got him as wide receiver 28 heading into week 9.
All right. And Chase, this feels like the question we're constantly asking. I've seen these teams, receivers dropped, added, traded, traded again. People are always trying to figure out what's going on. Jordan Love's in and out of the lineup, might not play again. Maybe who knows how long he might be out for. So we look at the Green Bay Packers receiving core. Where do you have? How deep can we deep into this pass receiving core? And what are we kind of prioritizing from those receivers?
We must have lost Chase a minute ago because I've noticed he's been like a little frozen on the screen.
Oh yeah, he's not moving.
So we'll get back to Chase. We'll try to get him back on here a little bit later. Go ahead, Chris. Ask your question.
So my question was, I'll go out to you guys. We're looking at the Packer receiver. I feel like we're always talking about this Packer receiver core. We're going to prioritize these receivers. How deep do we want to go? Especially, Malik Willis could be a quarterback back in the lineup. Wasn't necessarily bad, but it affects who catches the ball in a sense. So what do we look at the Green Bay receivers? How do we prioritize them? I'm going to start with you, Dan. What are your top 2 receivers in the Green Bay, and how deep will you go?
Well, it doesn't sound like Jordan Love's going to miss a ton of time, if he misses any time at all. So I'll start off with that. That's the good news. So I'm going to pretend that Jordan Love is the starting quarterback. I made this point last week that I didn't think people should be getting too hyped up about Dontavian Wicks because as Christian Watson got healthier, I assumed he'd take back that role. He did. He had more than double the amount of snaps, more than double the amount of routes than Dontavian Wicks did last week. I think it's only a matter of time that it keeps growing as he gets further away from that ankle injury. So to me, Watson's one of the top 2. And then it has to be Jaden Reed. When you're dealing with the wide receiver rotation the way that you are, I want to get somebody who gets the ball in multiple ways. Okay, so he gets the ball on the ground, he gets the ball through the air. He's the X factor in the big plays. So Jaden Reed, even though he's been a little bit of a slump, doesn't have a consistent target share. I do think we have to have the idea that Jaden Reed is more of a low-end wide receiver 2 than the high-end wide receiver 1 he was performing as, but he does get the ball more than just being reliant on the target share. So I do think it's Jaden Reed, and then for me, it's Christian Watson.
Adam, how about yourself? And is Tucker Kraft the guy that we can consistently, want to have in our lineups the rest of the year?
Tucker Kraft is having a really good year. I'm concerned he loses out to some of these other guys, especially Dan.
14% target share.
100%. I think Christian Watson coming back is the one that scares it for me, right? Because he's a big body who's getting a surprising amount of separation. He's a big body who's getting a surprising amount of yards after the catch, and that is the exact same thing that Christian Watson has done when healthy this season, is being a big body that is getting a surprising amount of separation and a surprising amount of yards after the catch. Actually, I think that to me is the biggest difference from Christian Watson this year and last year, is he's getting yards after the catch more similar to his rookie season than last year, right? Where he was, able to get down the field and kind of catch the ball in traffic, but he wasn't necessarily getting away from guys like he was in the past. And he seems to be back to being able to do that, which makes me a lot more excited for him. I do think Dobbs has a real role that you can be interested in. I think he will function as the chain mover in this offense. I think Christian Watson and Romeo Dobbs are going to be the guys that really dominate in that intermediate, right? And Jaden Reed, gets some stuff in the backfield and is able to go deep from the slot a couple times a game. I think that all three of them have a role, but I think I would agree with Dan. Ultimately, I think I would flip those two names personally. I think Watson will be a little more volatile, but those are the two that I think are the most valuable in Christian Watson and Jaden Reed.
All right, guys, and then finally, from all three of these teams, who's the guy that you want most of those, all the different pass catchers you talked about?
Ooh, that's a very good question. It's a tie for me between Josh Downs and Michael Pittman, because I think as Michael Pittman gets healthier, we're going to see his target share start to rise, and that passing game is about to go vertical consistently. And we already know what Pittman and Downs can do when they have a quarterback they can rely on. I think it has to be the Colts. I think the Colts might be set up for a nice little second half run now, with Joe Flacco getting in the starting quarterback. So I guess I'd lean Downs. That has been Flacco's guy, so slightly there.
I'm Downs as well. I think the deciding factor is between all of these guys. I think he's the one that has the least overlap with anyone else on their team, right? Like, we can talk about competition between Pierce and Pittman and Mitchell, but Downs is kind of his own thing. He is outside of that competition, and I think Tillman versus Judy, right? Those are both guys who are getting a lot of intermediate routes. So while I really like Tillman, there is competition there. And then with Dobbs and Watson, it's the same thing, right? And that's what makes Jaden Reed interesting. And I think he would be in that conversation for me because he is separate from those other guys, especially as Dontavian Wicks has kind of been phased out a little bit more in recent weeks. So Downs is my guy, I think, number one. But those other guys are definitely interesting.
All right, gentlemen. Well, thank you. And Adam, going to you now. Let's take some, get a temperature check.
Hot air. So hot in here.
All right. Yeah, we're going to do this a little bit differently this week. We're at as good of a halfway point of the season as I can think of with the 17 game slate now. And I'm ready to talk about some guys who have made massive shifts over the course of the season, right? So every week we typically talk about the guys who are the most liquid, the guys who are being, flown around, guys kind of like what you were just talking about, right? These Packers receivers, they're, you can sell them like nothing because everyone thinks a different guy is the guy. And that changes week to week, and people are like, all right, I'm going to buy him. Tillman was the same way a couple weeks ago, or last week rather. Downs has been a frequent guy on the move. But at any rate, I'm looking more so at guys who have, from the beginning of the season, week 1 to now, have changed their stock the most. We're going to talk about if those guys are guys who we are selling, we are buying, we think they're now valued correctly for the rest of the season. And Dan, I'm going to go ahead and start with you, and our player is going to be DeAndre Swift. Of the guys that we're going to talk about in this segment, he is the guy who is the most liquid. So he is the 6th most traded running back, one of the more traded players that have, significantly changed their values. And he, of these guys, that I think had the biggest variance in their values over the lifetime of their career, right? So in Dynasty, he's been as high as like the RB 2 or 3, I believe. He was definitely in the top 5. And as low as, and this is what we're coming from, I think around week 2 or week 3, when he was really deep in his struggles, he was down all the way to the running back 50 in Dynasty. And he has now climbed all the way back up from running back 50 to running back 21. So, Dan, I'm going to offer you some examples here, and then I'm going to ask you, is he now valued correctly, right? We've seen him as high as 5, as low as 50. Are we now, 21's correct? Or is there, some value to be gained here? So some example trades I've been able to find for DeAndre Swift are a round 1 straight up, a second and a fourth. Here's a topical one. Cedric Tillman plus a third. We have Ramondre Stevenson and a second for DeAndre Swift. We have Jordan Addison and a third. And again, he is the keep trade cut running back 21 in Dynasty rankings. And the ECR, he is the running back 13 this week.
Yeah, so first I just want to say I've been a DeAndre Swift lover since even the draft, and I'm so happy that he's gone to Chicago and people realize, no, he doesn't suck. He is good. I don't know why when he got 1,000 yards rushing for the Philadelphia Eagles, that was considered bad. Like, I don't understand any of it. And I'm glad he's been healthy during this time too, which I think has been a big thing. Like that was always a knock on Swift, even when he was at Detroit, and even was lighting it up with Detroit, right? Because he was bound to miss about 4 games at some point in the year, and that hasn't been the case for the last year and a half. The only trade on here I would do, and it depends on the situation that I'm in, but I would do the first, second, and fourth round pick. Okay, I would do that. Now, I would have to be in a situation where I'm not competing for the championship right now. But that is a lot of value if you're, let's say, a middle of the pack or a team looking to rebuild for a DeAndre Swift, because he's going to be locked into the Bears for at least one more year, but he is starting to get a little bit older. He's not a running back who, to me, is going to age out well, right? I mean, like, he's going to have the pass catching stuff, but we kind of seen Eckler kind of fall off a cliff. I can see a similar career arc here within the next 2 years for DeAndre Swift. It really wouldn't surprise me. Cedric Tillman, as much as I love Cedric Tillman, we have no idea what's going to happen with the Browns at quarterback. All right, and they don't have a great history of making smart decisions at the quarterback position. Now, Deshaun Watson's not going to be healthy to start the year because he's coming back off the Achilles injury, but his contract's still going to be around. He's going to be around. Jim Haslam might push it around. So we have no idea what the Browns are going to do at the quarterback positions. That's why it's a little shaky with Cedric Tillman. Ramondre I like, but the Patriots got to get a lot better fast. That one does pique my interest slightly, but not enough. And then Jordan Addison. I'm like, look, I love Jordan Addison, but I don't think Sam Darnold nor JJ McCarthy are good enough to consistently be able to keep Addison in the game plan week to week when Justin Jefferson's there and just commanding the dominant target share that he's gonna command. So I think I'm sticking with Swift unless I'm in the situation where I can rebuild for the first, second, and fourth.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think he's a great contending piece right now. If you're winning, and if you've had him the last little bit with what you probably paid for him, you probably are contending.
Adam, real quick before you move on, we did have 2 questions I want to get to real fast. So this is a funny one. Gatlin asking Malik Neighbors, Tyreek Hill, or London rest of season. So some superstar wide receivers. Where, Chris, do you lean right now between those 3?
That's tough. I'm going to go, look, I know Drake London's been pretty consistent, looks pretty good. There's a lot of different mouths to feed in Atlanta. I'm going to stick with the guy as long as he's healthy. That's the key thing. He's been healthy last week. I'm going to go Tyreek Hill. Now that Tua is back, I think his offense is starting to find itself. The running game starting to reestablish itself. It's a matter of time before they get the play action, passing attack. Tyreek Hill is, to me, the alpha receiver, the guy who almost had 2,000 yards last year. You're just hoping that he gets kind of the chance they got to show that again. I go with Tyreek. I know it's a little bold, but I think the other 2 guys, I like their young potential. I think you have questions about Daniel Jones. God forbid Drew Luck takes over at quarterback at some point for the Giants. And I like Drake London, like I said, but there's a lot of different mouths to feed in Atlanta. They kind of change their faces week to week. So I'm going to go with Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, I'd be terrified of Drew Lock too. The next question, Dominic asking, should he drop Stafford or Goff for Dak? Adam, what do you think?
I would strongly consider dropping Stafford. I know he just had the big week, but I mean, we know this throughout this entire season, right? If they get in the red zone, it's like the opposite of what's happening for the Rams. They will want Kyron to be the one getting in the end zone. Thankfully, this past week, Kyron caught the ball, and then they wanted to get their guys, would just come back into the end zone. But Stafford is someone who the last 2 years have been like, he's playing well, but getting in the end zone has been tough. And it just has been. I think these games have been few and far between for him. I think he's playing good ball. But I just think the reality of the situation is the way that they're playing doesn't necessarily get him passing touchdowns that often, nearly as much as you would expect. So I would want to go Dak.
That's fair. I think I like Stafford more for the rest of the season. I agree with you. I do like Stafford quite a bit this week against Seattle. I'm just want to put it's a good matchup for that system.
That week I don't disagree.
Yeah, that's week coming up. So Dak rest of the season, I'm with you. Okay, so what do you got next for us, Adam?
Yeah, so Chris, I'm gonna go ahead over to you really quick, and this is an exciting one. As Brian Thomas Jr., who has been a massive climber so far this season, especially in dynasty circles. He is up to the keep trade cut wide receiver 10, is firmly in the top tier of receivers. A lot of people have been making note of his yards per route run being in line with some of the dominant rookie wide receivers in years past, like Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. Obviously not getting the same volume, but doing a really good job in showing his incredible explosiveness and kind of showing that he has more in the tank than just the couple routes he ran in college. He doesn't necessarily have a full route tree like some of those guys we just talked about, but definitely more than he showed at LSU. So he's a lot less liquid just because of his age. People don't really want to move off of him. A lot less liquid than Swift. He's the 47th most traded wide receiver. But, I mean, listen out some of these deals. He is incredibly expensive. So, if you prefer your priors, Marvin Harrison Jr., straight up 1-for-1 if you want to, flip that. You can get 2 firsts, Xavier Worthy and Jordan Addison. Saw Amon-Ra St. Brown straight up, which is an interesting one for sure. Tank Dell in a first, or Devonta Smith in a first for Brian Thomas Jr.
Oh, well, that's where I can look at all these trades, because right now I'm making those deals. Look, Brian Thomas Jr. has had a great rookie year, but and you talked about the route tree being expanded. Maybe he has 4 routes he runs now, Adam. It hasn't expanded that much. Let's not get crazy. He's basically going down the field. He's basically stretches the field. What he can be possibly is Nico Collins, and that's what the upside that you're hoping for and you're banking on in the sense of your trading. We're talking about a guy, Amon St. Brown, for example, who's been a top receiver. I know that people are worried about maybe the mouth feed. Amon St. Brown's a stud. He always starts off the season slow. It's not something new. It's something he regularly does. Then he gets his little rhythm and he turns to Justin Jefferson. Some other guys you talked about. I wouldn't do the Addison trade. The two other receivers. I'm not necessarily sold on getting 2 Bs for 1A. But I also think Brian Thomas, look, there's going to be a lot of changes in Jacksonville. Yes, Trevor Lawrence will be the quarterback. We don't know what the coaching staff's going to look like necessarily. We don't know what the other receivers are going to look like. Christian Kirk was in the last year's deal. They can get out of his deal, I should say. Evan Ingram's 32 years old. There's a good chance this team's going to add another receiver. It could be a draft, or it could be somebody they add, pay, because they're going to have defensive cap space. I say all that because it's easy for Brian Thomas to become that receiver 2 in an offense and not be that primary guy. All those big names you talked about, all the receiver ones that I can get my hands on right now, I'm pulling the trigger on those deals. Marvin Harrison Jr. for Brian Thomas, give me Marvin Harrison Jr. all day, every day. I'm definitely pulling the trigger. All those deals are for those 2B receivers for 1A.
Yeah, I'm with it. He's been really exciting. To your point, I tried to draw that line right because he's been more than just a streak guy, but he has developed into a streak and crosser guy functionally. Is where we've gone. So step up for sure from LSU, but it's again not running a full route tree like for example Marvin Harrison Jr. is. So I'm with you. I don't want to downgrade at wide receiver, but if I can get another top tier receiver and maybe something like small on the side, then that's awesome. One more guy.
And real quick, and 2 number 1s is another thing. I mean, look, these receivers, people act like you can never find another receiver. Guys are going to get drafted. And you might find a guy in the 3rd or 4th round that could be your top star receiver. So getting 2 number 1s over the next 2 years is something I definitely would be interested in as well. Sorry, I'm going to cut you off.
Yeah, no, 100%. Agreed there, depending on, the state of the team you're getting the ones from, but for sure, as a general thought. I'm going to kick this to you, Dan, because you were definitely high on him from a fantasy perspective coming into the season. But this is Dynasty, which is a little bit different, and our evaluations weren't exactly super high on him on this show. But Jaden Daniels is now the Keep Trade Cut Dynasty quarterback 1 overall. The number 1 guy in the ECR. He is the QB4. And that is accounting for, I mean, look, the Hail Mary was awesome, but it was not a great game this past week with him coming off of the injury. I don't think there's any questions there. He is the least liquid of all these guys. He's the 37th most traded quarterback. He is had 133 trades this week, 635 this month. He's not someone that is on the move, but it's because the cost has gotten ridiculous. So here are, of those 133 trades this week, here are a couple of them. A sample. We have Lamar Jackson, straight up. Josh Allen, straight up. Jamar Chase and Bo Nix. Or CeeDee Lamb, straight up. At that cost, in Dynasty, if we're talking long term, what do you make of it?
Well, and I'm also going to do this with the idea that we're talking about this from a super flex.
Correct, yes.
Typically, because that's typically what we're doing with Dynasty. I would take every single one of these trades, except for CeeDee Lamb, because I think that whole thing in Dallas might just blow up in somebody's face pretty soon. But I would take every single one of these other trades here. Lamar, Josh Allen, straight up. Are you crazy? These guys are just now in their prime. Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. Look, I love what Jaden's been doing, okay? And he's been a far better passer than even I thought he was going to be, and I was huge on him for fantasy football purposes. But this is still a skinny guy who takes a lot of hits. Now, he didn't want to miss any games because his last one, the rib issue, but it doesn't dissipate the fact that this guy doesn't get out of the way. Like Lamar Jackson, he's been a skinny guy for most of his career, has done a very good job avoiding injury because he knows how to avoid the big hit. Jaden Daniels is being smacked every single week. And that's exactly what I feared. And the fact that he actually hasn't broken yet to this point kind of surprised me a little bit, to be honest with you. I'm not going to bank on that luck continuing. If I get Lamar, Josh Allen, Jamar Chase, and Bo Nix, CeeDee Lamb's the only one that I would question not, but I would do this. I would do any of these deals.
Chris, real quick, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Look, Jaden Daniels is getting a lot of credit for things, and I like Jaden Daniels. He's been playing really well. But Marcus Mariota put the same exact numbers up when he was a starting quarterback for the Washington Commanders when he was this past.
To be fair, it was Carolina.
But let's also be fair. Jaden Daniels played the Giants. He's played shitty teams too. He hasn't played all-star teams as well. And some of the defenses he did play that were decent, such as Chicago, didn't play as well. Could be an injury, we're not sure. I bring up all that because what my point is I agree with Dan. I'm going with the known commodities over the guys that I think could be good. So Anthony Richardson was the guy that everybody was sold on last year. I wasn't sold on, but everybody would argue with you. You had to get rid of Anthony Richardson. You could have give Josh Allen, whoever you can get your hands on for Lamar Jackson, whatever. If you made that trade last year and you traded Lamar Jackson for Anthony Richardson, what are you doing right now? So for me, I am not looking to make any of these trades. Jaden Daniels is a guy who's having a good rookie year right now. Kyler Murray had a really good year with Cliff Kingsbury did too. Kyler Murray was about to get kicked off the Arizona Cardinals team and get replaced. Cliff Kingsbury did get fired. So things can get sour real quick. And this is a team that's overachieving. What we love to do, we love to tear guys down after they underachieve. Look at the Giants, for example. And this is a Washington team that's definitely overachieving. Reality could kick in next year. Not saying Gene Daniels is going to be bad. And Dan, I think he's doing a better job not getting hit like he was in college. I think he's doing a much better job of getting out of bounds. He's picking and choosing a bit better. So I don't think he's going to get smacked every week. But I do think there's some questions about, is he have more upside to go versus a Josh Allen, a Lamar Jackson, who has now a plethora of pass catchers, by the way. So there's not those two guys and those draft picks. They're things that I'm definitely going to pull the trigger on for a guy that looks really good right now, but let's see.
Yeah, Jaden Daniels has impressed me in a lot of ways. I think he's a more valuable dynasty asset than I anticipated. Josh Allen or Lamar straight up is insane, and I'm taking those 100%.
Remember, RG3 was awesome. Colin Kaepernick was awesome. And then
I'm with you. All right, but hey, an example of another guy who's done really good things for his stock, and we're going to talk about some gambling for, and that's Brock Bowers.
Absolutely. All right, it is time for your big time bets, and we got 3 great ones here for you this week. Speaking of Brock Bowers, I love his over 66.5 receiving yards. He's been over 3 of the last 4 games. He has a 32% target share since week 5. A great match against the Bengals, who are allowing the 7th most receiving yards to the tight ends. Bowers is the number 1 target on the Raiders. Jacoby Myers is even second to him. So we're cashing over Brock Bowers 66.5 receiving yards this week. Now we got an under. Now I'm not so thrilled. Kyler Murray under 1.5 passing touchdowns this week. Basically, I just have him throwing for 1. This past week, I know he got more than just 1. I get it. But that's the first time since week 2 that he had more than 1 passing touchdown. The passing is wildly inconsistent with these guys. The running game has been their best bet and will be their best bet to score against Chicago. Is the only weakness has been in part of their defense. You can run up the middle against Chicago a little bit. They've only allowed 5 passing touchdowns all season, tied for the best in the league. Yeah, guess what? Give me under Kyler Murray 1.5 passing touchdowns this week. Jameis Winston over a half an interception. I know he didn't throw a pick last week, but there were four missed opportunities by the Ravens that should have had picks in that game. Got absolutely lucky, especially at the end of the game. It could have been a game winner by Kyle Hamilton. Couldn't pull it off. The Ravens have been bad at the secondary. The Chargers have not. They have forced 6 interceptions so far this season. They're in the top 10 in that category. I think Jameis Winston will be due for an interception here. And those are your big time bets.
And I'll crush you like a paper cup.
All right. So with that, we get to end the show with our last segment of the day, our crush or bust of the week, our must starts, our must sits of the week. In other words, Adam, let's go to you. Who are you crushing on headed into week 9?
I think Ladd McConkey is super interesting this week. It kind of piggybacks off of Chase's bust on the other side. I don't know if we're going to get to talk about that given his internet issues. But look, this Cleveland defense is very strong against the run. They had the weird game against the Raiders, which kind of made it look like that was going the wrong direction. But since then, they've been a much better run defense. And going back to last year, they were a strong one, so I tend to believe that is genuinely the case. And with that, I think that you could see a bit of a pivot from the Chargers, and I also think the Browns are showing a lot of emphasis and that they want to throw the football, right? And if the offenses are kind of playing high tempo for Cleveland, that could kind of force the Chargers into a bit of a similar situation. You get a couple turnovers quick from Cleveland, this could certainly go the other direction, kind of to your point in the previous section. But I would not be shocked if this is a higher scoring game than the Chargers have been wanting to play in so far this season. And Ladd McConkey is finally establishing himself, getting all of the snaps at wide receiver, and the targets have gone up the last month. And I think we're just waiting for the passing attempts to just be where they need to be for him to really flourish. And I think this is an opportunity for that. Again, Cleveland's more exploitable in the secondary so far this season than they are against the run. And specifically, you can beat them kind of in the inside, right? Because Ward has gotten a lot better on the outside, but you can still kind of beat them in the interior. So I think Ladd McConkey's in a good spot.
Yeah, I totally agree. Rookie wide receivers establishing themselves in the second half of the season. We've seen this pattern, and now Ladd McConkey is establishing himself as a go-to option for Justin Herbert. So I love Ladd McConkey as a start here this week as well. I do have a question coming in from Alex. Should trade Josh Jacobs and Jacoby Myers for Alvin Kamara when he has Lamb, Barkley, Walker, and Adams and Higgins? So would you make that deal, Chris, before we go to you?
I would pull the trigger on that deal. I think Alvin Kamara is about to get back on track. Their offensive line is getting healthy. Derek Carr's coming back. Taysom Hill's getting healthy as well. As long as there's a blocker or two out there, Derek Carr's the quarterback, Alvin Kamara is going to have great value moving forward again.
Yeah, totally agree. The Saints are going to be, their offense is going to be not pathetic. Okay. It's pretty soon it's going to happen. All right. So, Chris, who are you loving? Who are you crushing on for week 8?
Well, I talked to you guys about the different receivers. My crush this week is Michael Pittman from the Colts. I like with him with Joe Flacco. ECR number 32, finished top 30 both weeks with Joe Flacco as a quarterback. Had 100 yards one of the games, had a touchdown with the other game. Michael Pittman's a guy, as long as he's healthy, the back might be a little bit of an issue, but I expect him to be out there this week, is a guy that I think you talk about the different roles they have on these teams. A lot of the guys are out there to clear out. Michael Pittman's the guy that can be that familiar safety blanket for Joe Flacco. And then in the red zone, Michael Pittman a lot this week in your lineups.
Yeah, so I'll just piggyback off of that and go with my crush of the week too, because guess what? It's his teammate, Josh Downs, who's still sitting at wide receiver 30 in ECR. I thought that was a little bit surprising. I got him up at wide receiver 15. A must top 20 play this week. Flacco takes over in the 2 starts with Flacco. Downs was the wide receiver 13 in weeks 5 and 6. He's had a 26.5% target share, 135 yards and a touchdown in that stretch. And against the Vikings defense, you can throw on this defense, especially over the middle of this defense. They leave holes when they go to blitz as much as they do. In fact, they're giving up the most wide receiver fantasy points on a per game basis and the 3rd most passing yards on a per game basis. And Downs has been the more favored receiver for Flacco. And we'll see if Pittman's getting more healthier from that back issue. So I'm with you on Downs. I will throw out Chase's crush just so you guys know. It was Terry McLaurin. He's got his top 6 play. I mean, he didn't do great the first week against the Giants, but I will say that week we weren't getting the version of the Commanders offense we're getting today. We were getting bubble screen, keep everything within 5 yards. Jaden Daniels, since that week 2 game against the Giants, starting to throw the ball down the field more. Terry McLaurin has been on a tear. Scary Terry back in town. I agree with him. He should be a top play. I don't know if I have him in the top 6, but I do agree with him. He should be a start in your lineups this week. All right. Now we got to flip to the other side, right? We got to figure out who do we not want to play, who we might typically have in our lineups. Adam, who's your bust this week?
A guy who I talked about earlier and who I do think is, for season long, I think he's in a really good spot. I think you can kind of rely on him. I just don't think it's this week. I'm worried about the Jacksonville Jaguars offensive line and their matchup this week, and as a result, Brian Thomas Jr., who gets a lot of his value down the field, I am really concerned about him this week. I think, if unfortunately, and I hate to say it, if Christian Kirk was healthy, this would be a big week for him, right? Because this is something where they're going to want to get the ball out of Trevor's hands very quickly. Unfortunately, he's gone. They're going to have to make things work otherwise, and maybe they're able to unleash Brian Thomas Jr., on those crossers, maybe a little bit shorter down the field. I just don't know that they're going to have a lot of time to develop things down the field. I know that they haven't been too bad off, since Cam Robinson, I believe, didn't play much week 7 and didn't play at all in week 8 for them. But even then, I'm just concerned about the offensive line, in this matchup.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And I'm going to throw a sneaky little play. This is a little bonus sneaky sleeper play based on, because we brought up Christian Kirk, was a great point. I know the Eagles have been the number 1 defense against the tight ends this year. When Christian Kirk doesn't play, Evan Ingram gets double-digit targets. You talk about the quick passing game. I think there might be a heavy volume game here for Evan Ingram. So not that he probably wasn't already in most people's top 12 tight ends. I would imagine he would be, but it's somebody I would definitely want in my lineup as a result of what Adam's saying and why Brian Thomas is a bust this week for him. Chris, who do you not want to play this week, man?
Well, if I have my options, this is a guy I prefer not to play, and I definitely don't think he's as high as ECR has in the top 5, and that's Joe Burrow. Look, I know it's like a sweet matchup versus the Raiders, but Joe Burrow's had one top 5 finish this entire season. They have to versus the Ravens. We had to throw 5 touchdown passes in order to do that. I don't think the Raiders are scoring the same amount of points the Ravens were scoring in that game. He's had 3 out of his 8 games. He's been outside the top 10. Only 3 times has he been in the top 10 out of 8 weeks. So this guy hasn't been one of the top quarterbacks in general. Last 2 weeks has not been a quarterback one option for you. And like I said, I know it looks like a sweet matchup versus the Raiders. That means they can run the ball. Chase Brown, I think Zach Moss will be involved. I don't like Joe Burrow's upside. I like Joe Burrow. If I can avoid playing this week, you might have to. But if you can avoid so, I would want to play Joe Burrow.
Ooh, wouldn't want to play Joe Burrow.
That's a bold statement.
I don't know if I can't go as far as I don't want to play him. Now, if you want to say
I shouldn't say. I think there's better options. I should say. I guess that's what I should have said because you're right. It's not a guy that I'm petrified to play, but it's a guy that I think there's actually way better options, such as like a Baker Mayfield, where it looks bad on paper, but I think will wind up being better fantasy wise.
I disagree with that. I don't think Baker's going to do anything. I have him ranked way lower than Joe Burrow going up against Kansas City without having Mike Evans. But besides the fact of, does your opinion change if we know T. Higgins is going to play?
It doesn't. I mean, look, Cincinnati, if they play to win a game right now, their offensive line is not very good. The one thing the Raiders can do is generate some pressure with Max Crosby, and you can run the ball on the Raiders. I think overall Cincinnati has been pretty content if they can move the ball simply, like the Giants game, for example. They're not going to necessarily go out to blow you out. And if Joe Burrow is not going to be stretching the field, he only had 6.3 yards the last 2 weeks, or 6.5 yards per attempt last 2 weeks. This isn't the guy that, necessarily looking to push the ball down the field all over and over again. So if they can sit there and kind of feed Mike Gesicki and T. Higgins once in a while, I think you get another 2-touchdown game maybe. But it's a guy that, like I said, a lot of other options this week that I like more.
Okay. It's fair enough. All right. So for my bust this week and this breaks my heart because I have so many shares of this guy, but it's Jalen Waddle. I am not loving the idea that Esar has him ranked as wide receiver 22. He's not a must-play wide receiver 2. He's not a top 24 play, in my opinion. I do have him at wide receiver 31. So the fact is, Waddle's been kind of a boomer bust wide receiver 3 for a year and a half now. And that doesn't just include the Tua injury coming back this year. Even with Tua back, he hasn't been the guy. Like, he's been getting 4, 5, maybe 6 targets tops. That's been about it. He's not earning enough of a target share to be considered a wide receiver 2, even with Tua in there. It's been 15% with Tua in at quarterback. And the bigger issue here is that Tua's checking the ball down. It's Devon Achane who's taken over as the second pass catcher in that offense to Tyreek Hill, not Jalen Waddle. He's not throwing the ball downfield nearly as much. There's another element to this too. It's the matchup with the Bills. Okay, Waddle hasn't finished better than wide receiver 39 versus the Bills since 2022. Tua has been the biggest problem historically against the Bills because he has a career completion percentage of 61%, average of 199 yards, and a 7-10 touchdown to interception ratio. Tua sucks against Buffalo, and Waddle, who's not getting enough of target share, cannot benefit as a result to that. Maybe Tyreek Hill can, maybe Devon Achane can, but not Jalen Waddle. So I have him as a boomer bust wide receiver 3. It only takes one play, so he's still in the mix, but he's not a must play for me this week. And with that, is going to wrap it up for the Operation Domination Show. I hope you guys all enjoyed the episode. We'll be back, of course, next week to preview Week 10 at 9:30 on our YouTube channel, Fantasy Football Advice Network. But I'll also be back tomorrow night to talk with Dr. Brian Scott with a big injury list for him at 8 p.m. You can find that live on social media at FF Advice Network. We will release the video and, of course, the podcast on Friday. And you can download Operation Domination wherever you listen to your podcast. Make sure you give Adam and myself a follow, and we'll check Chris out next week. See you guys then, and good luck. Hey there, I want to thank you for watching Operation Domination today. And if you're enjoying the show, there are some ways you can help support us. You can go to podchaser.com/Operation Domination and leave us a 5-star review. And you can do this on any podcast platform or on our YouTube page when you go to @FF Advice Network. This completely helps out the show be able to grow, and also leave us comments to let us know how we can curtail the show to you, because you are the most important member of the show. So again, go to podchaser.com/Operation Domination to leave a 5-star review and leave a comment wherever you listen or watch the show, and we'll help better serve you.